Doctor about my opinion. Oh, that was you press record. That's very unfortunate for me.
Alright, this video is gonna be on why Dark Hole should be at 3. And there are a lot of people here who won't like the fact that Dark Hole should be at 3.
And if you're one of those people, you're just not thinking about it. Yeah. This is I'm gonna go to the toilet so you can do this, but it's what I'm now calling the Goyo Guardian effect. Goyo's so broken. It does nothing. It's so good. You're a fucking idiot. Just think about it just listen to him.
Yeah.
He'll tell you it all.
So we are of the belief that Dark Hole should go to 3.
Or 2.
Yeah, or
if
2.
If you're super strict about it staying at 1, then put it at 2.
Yeah. But really we think it should go to 3 and it's fine. So Dark Hole as a card, it is the best removal spell in the game for monsters. So it's mixed in that. Yes, it clears everything. Obviously, it's incredibly powerful. You just destroy all monsters on the field. It's a board wipe. It has a very powerful effect. But the thing with monster removal is that requires an element of reactivity about it in order for it to be productive. So, in most senses, so something like D-Prison, you think, why does D-Prison get played over Mirror Force a lot of the time? Even though Mirror Force obviously has a stronger effect, is because D-Prison deals with the threat in a more effective way by removing it from play. But likewise, both are traps and are therefore reactive. They can respond to a certain game state. Dark Hole can't respond to a certain game state. It needs to be given time in order to be used. So if the opponent's attacking me for game, the Dark Hole in my hand is completely useless. And this isn't to bash Dark Hole. I'm a huge fan of Dark Hole. But what I'm saying is that Dark Hole wouldn't restrict people from being able to aggress onto the field. Something like TT, if TT were to go to 3, then TT would hinder people's ability to OTK, because people would constantly be having to think about playing into the TT. While with Dark Hole wouldn't restrict your play in any way, because Dark Hole can't respond to anything. You wouldn't drop off field, swing for game, and the opponent would be like, "What, Dark Hole?" Because they would be dead. It wouldn't do anything. But by the same token, it punishes overextension incredibly well, and is arguably the best card in the game at punishing overextension bar TT. Because if they just jizz a field for no reason, and then don't do anything with it, then they're going to get punished for it.
Also, thinking about the current metagame as it stands right now, Soul Charge would be far less broken if Dark Hole were at 2 or 3, simply because they would make a field and they wouldn't be able to OTK you because they can't attack. So like it really mitigates Soul Charge having to go on the ban list in any sense. But that's a complete side conversation.
With the game as it is now, the format is a very slow format. Dark Hole would rarely establish itself as being anything too strong in terms of what it might have been if it were at 3. I don't know, when Mermails were the best deck back when Abyss Rising came out or something like that, when they could foreseeably just clear a whole field. It's like now Dark Hole now is quite often just a 1-for-1.
If you think about it as well, the format that came directly after that Mermail format, people didn't even play Dark Hole. Like you didn't play Dark Hole in Dragon Rules. You sided it to get rid of their spellcaster if you were playing against spellbooks, but like you didn't even main it.
You could main it, but it wasn't.
Yeah. You could have mained it.
It wasn't amazing, and you essentially did side 3 Dark Hole. Hopefully, in that you sided 3 Last Day of Witch, which you should have been.
Lots of the Americans tended to just play 1 Last Day, which I don't really understand, because you want Last Day. If you're playing against spellbooks, you want to open. Maybe by that logic, what they did was play 1 Dark Hole, 1 Last Day, and just had like 2 Last Days. Holes. Yeah.
But yeah, it isn't as good. But back onto the Dark Hole discussion. There's no real reason why it is at 1. It isn't powerful enough to be at 1. I mean, sure, the effect is on a base level incredibly powerful, but in practical application, it doesn't swing momentum in your favor in any way, because it's way too reactive to be something like that. It isn't something like Heavy Storm where you use it and then OTK, because that isn't how it works.
Heavy Storm's very different as well, because back row the way we tend to think about back row in Yu-Gi-Oh! because it's true, is that they're resources that are not replenishable. Monsters can produce other monsters. Back row can't produce other back row, and that tends to be the reason that Heavy Storm is just too good, because it's like a straight, like, say, okay, you have 3 back row, they play heavy, it's like a straight -2, whereas Dark Hole, you know, the monsters are resources that can float or can be replenished over time. The back row is different.
And Storm was obviously so powerful because it would just swing the tide of the whole match in your favor. It would enable you to suddenly capitalize on that advantage that you'd reclaimed. If you Dark Hole even 3 monsters and then get that same +2, it doesn't enable you to do anything for yourself more so than if you had destroyed their back row, because your monsters are no more safer with their monsters gone than they would have been otherwise. It's just a means of limiting the amount that your opponent can do. In that sense, Heavy Storm and Dark Hole are complete opposites, because Heavy Storm enables you to expand upon what you've done, while Dark Hole is nothing but an inhibitor to make sure that they can't overextend and run themselves away from the game in a way that you can't keep up with. So
yeah, that's a very interesting point that you make about them being opposites. It's almost as though Dark Hole effectively brings about the end of a game, whereas Heavy Storm brings about the end of a game, whereas Dark Hole restarts it in some smaller sense in terms of the monsters you have on board. It restarts it in that fashion.
Yeah, and Dark Hole would create healthy game state mindsets in the same way that arguably Heavy Storm did. This was why a lot of people liked Heavy Storm, myself included, for a while.
No.
Because it forced you to not overcommit back row.
It got banned a format too late, I thought, personally, but sure.
Yeah, Storm became way too much. But Dark Hole would likewise force people to be more conservative with their monsters, not just commit them when they can't have game. Because again, it doesn't stop you from getting game. If you have the Dark Hole in your hand and they swing for game, then
you lose.
Yeah, you're bummed. But you can't just blindly throw monsters into things. Soul Charge for a big field for no reason. You have to think about conservation.
And this is where the very fair aspect of Dark Hole comes in, because like with Heavy Storm, I keep comparing it to Heavy because it's a very obvious comparison.
Yeah.
But like with Heavy Storm, the game swings so far against your favour. Losing those 2 or 3 back row is so detrimental to the game that you're gonna lose. Whereas losing the 2 or 3 monsters isn't that detrimental. You shouldn't have been playing so many monsters on the field. You should have been putting that many monsters on the field unless you were trying to win. The fact that you have that many monsters on the field means that 1, your opponent can punish you with Dark Hole, and that's essentially fair, and 2, it doesn't matter too badly, because you're just losing a few monsters which you can eventually deal with. Eventually?
Eventually
Yeah,
deal with.
well, I'm tired, it's late.
If we're doing the comparison game, then you can compare Dark
They don't
Hole.
compare at all, they just have a different word on them.
But you can compare
Monsters
Dark
or
Hole
Spell
with
Trap.
other monster removal, and it's barely even
Better.
Yeah,
Barely
it's
better
barely
than
even
a
better.
Smashing Ground.
Yeah, I was about to say that it's barely better than a Smashing Ground or a Soul Taker at this stage.
Or an Evil Swarm O Lantern.
Yeah.
No, I'm
And
joking.
the more obvious comparison would be with the traps, but as I said before, Dark Hole is inherently going to be in a separate category from things like Deep Prison and Mirror Force.
Yeah, because it's
TP.
spell speed 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it is reactive to a much greater degree than the traps are.
Mm.
Because
The
the traps can save you.
Yeah, I guess you would describe the traps as impulsively reactive, whereas Dark Hole is passively reactive.
Yeah.
If they're killing you regardless of Dark Hole.
Yeah.
But the traps are not the same, of course.
So then, would it be that bad to have essentially a stronger Smashing Ground in the game? I mean, it would make such cards obsolete, but would that matter? Would it matter to have a Smashing Ground that could hit for 2? Say they even released a card with a normal spell with the effect destroy 2 monsters on the field. Would that even do anything? Like Dark Hole isn't restricted because of what it does, but rather by nature of what it is, the fact that it is a normal spell.
I think actually maybe the example of that spell that you just gave might be a bit too good just because it doesn't destroy your monsters at the same time.
Yeah, of course.
It might be slightly too good, but
Yeah, that card would be better actually.
yeah, it would be better than Dark Hole.
It would be better than Dark Hole. But the point is made in that the fact that it is a normal spell, and as you said, is passively reactive rather than impulsively reactive.
You give them their entire turn. They can set.
They've probably swung for damage.
They've set back row as well. It's not like this is the real difference with Dark Hole is that you activate Dark Hole. It's never like Dark Hole for game. It's like
of course,
in
they
the
still have back row.
if you're playing competitively, it's never like that. You're never going Dark Hole full game. You're doing probably Dark Hole early to mid game to try and restabilize. Yeah. It's really not this broken game winning card that it may seem to be.
Yeah. So I think it makes complete sense to have Dark Hole to 3. Firstly, because it's nowhere near as powerful as it appears.
Yeah, it appears. Yeah.
It's passively reactive. It won't stop you from losing the game. It's generally just, I would say, a slightly above average card at the moment. I wouldn't say that it's broken in any way, but I wouldn't say that it's bad. I would say that it is slightly above average, compared with everything else that you could play in most decks, and it would have a good effect on the game. It would force people to actually consider the things that they do, make sure that they don't overextend monsters, just soul charge into 5 for no reason.
It's like, well, I'll bring this one out to defend later on. It's like you can't do that. I'm gonna sweep them all up with Dark Hole.
Yeah. Even in terms of people making their decisions early on in the game, like say they just want to go into, I don't know, like a Draco Lovable for no reason, it would force them to rethink the extent that they're going to commit to the field and things like that if they're not going to get game.
And as we said before, if it does get Dark Hole, they're not going to lose because of it.
Yeah. And another thing, people wouldn't play 3. People wouldn't play 3 Dark Hole. That's a misconception.
Not in the main deck. At very least, not in the main deck.
You might side the 3rd, but odds are you would main 2 or main 1 inside the 2nd.
Yep. I agree.
So it wouldn't create many problems, and even if it did, it was like, alright, the first one, if you use it early game, it'll be a 1-for-1, unless at any point the counter to this, if it gets more, would be if it punishes overextension. So it would be an early game 1-for-1, a mid game maybe 2-for-1, and nothing really more than that, because by the late game, if they've extended a lot, then you should be dead.
Yeah. And if they haven't killed you, then they deserve to get Dark Hold because they've extended and not won because of it, essentially.
So it punishes overextension, but it's nowhere near as powerful as something like Storm.
Or even TT.
Yeah.
Like, TT is the shit.
TT is just a much better Dark Hole. As we've explained, Storm and Dark Hole are literally opposites.
You know what else Hole is really good for? Problem cards like Majesty's Fiend, Vanity's Fiend, Jinzo, like these cards are
floodgate monsters.
These cards are coming back into our game in quite a serious way, and it deals with them.
Yeah. And it is healthy to have a generic out to cards like that.
It's like you can never summon, like, if you're playing Majesty's Fiend and something, you can never summon Majesty's Fiend without having a lance. You could just not do it. It would never be worth it.
You could barely ever do it anyway.
Yeah.
You'd have to wait until 2 of the Dark Holes are gone. It would be very weird. But yeah, with all these things in mind, we really believe that Dark Hole should go to 3, and
it creates a good deal of balance in the game.
Yeah, it fixes the game, like
not entirely, but
but it
helps balance
it goes
the game.
some way to fix the game.
It helps balance the game a lot.
A lot of changes on the ban list are neutral. Like, this is actually a positive change that could come from the ban list.
It's a difference that would be you would play more, and it would make the game actively better.
Thanks for watching. Dark Hole to 3. See you around.
Don't play 3. No.
I might